Welcome to Southern Discomfort. This is one of the most unique podcasts on the internet. Southern tales of the weird, wild, mysterious, unusual, voodoo, cryptids, hauntings. Are you intrigued yet? This is Southern Discomfort. Southern Discomfort. And now, your hosts, April and Christine.
Hey everybody, welcome back. In case you're just tuning in, then welcome. We have another story for you tonight.
We do. Hey everybody, it's Christine. Before we get started though, I just want to remind everybody to follow us on our socials. On Twitter, we're So Disco PC. Instagram, Southern Discomfort PC. And Facebook, Southern Discomfort Podcast. You can email us at southerndiscomfortpodcast@gmail.com and find our podcast on Podbean, Southern Discomfort, or anywhere you get your podcasts. And we're glad you're here, and we've got a good one for you. What's on tap for our drink du jour?
We have Snowball Juice, which is an IPA by Urban South. Places where you brew beer.
I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
And
that was the avoidance of saying
yes,
brewery.
There you go. Thank you. It's a hazy, juicy IPA, smooth drinking, hopped up IPA with nearly 5 pounds per barrel of Idaho 7, Vic's Secret, El Dorado, and Citra. If you know what that means.
How is it?
It's not bad. It's on a scale of 1 to 10, with me not being an IPA connoisseur, I would give it a 5.
Okay. Well, that's fair. And, you know, for our listeners or repeat listeners, they know that you do tend to try IPAs typically and know that I'm not a fan of them. So I actually have an ale, Urban South Ale. It's part of their Pop collection, Tangerine Sour. It's a sour wheat ale aged on loads of tangerine puree, reminiscent of a fresh mimosa. It brings a refreshing sour ale with loads of sweet tangerine, soft acidity, and a pop of effervescence at the end. Grab a porch and grab a pop.
Oh, I like that.
I love Urban South. Their branding is just really cool.
Yeah, so they're out of New Orleans. So if that gives you a hint, we're going to get right into it.
Hint.
Yeah. So back in Louisiana again. So everybody grab your drink and let's get uncomfortable.
Let's do it.
So tonight we're talking about Carville. This was the only leper colony in the U.S. Maybe.
Well, I believe Massachusetts and actually Hawaii.
Right.
However, I think Hawaii was first, then came the Massachusetts and Louisiana colony. But Louisiana definitely is the most notable, I believe. I mean, for reasons we'll get into.
Yeah. So leprosy is a biblical disease. I mean, it's a tale as old as time.
10 Commandments.
Yes.
The plague.
Yes. They are over 30 passages or references to leprosy itself in the Bible. I checked. So just kidding. No, I don't know. That's what I...
Right. And it's what it's the effects or symptoms of leprosy are what I think of when I think about the plague.
Right.
I don't know if that's, the same thing that others think about, but that's just for me.
Right. And then growing up, our mother grew up in Baton Rouge, and so she would tell us, I just remember her telling us, I don't know what you remember, but stories about the leper colony in Louisiana and just being terrified as a young kid,
Well, so she used to go, okay, so Nana would take her on trips up and down the river to these antique
Yeah.
shops, and that you'd have to go through Carville to get to the antique shop. So Mom said that as a small kid, she would be in the car and just hold her breath when they drove by, just terrified just of what she had heard about the patients or residents of Carville. So as a result of that, when I was a kid, we were kids, and she would tell stories about when she was a kid. I naturally was afraid too, so didn't want to go anywhere near
anywhere near Carville.
Right.
Right.
I just won't even go. Like, we'll stay away from there.
Some things make sense now.
Which is, you'll see as we go through that it's this stigma that really perpetuated this colony and this lifelong isolation.
Absolutely. So there were increased cases of leprosy in New Orleans, and in 1894, 5 men and 2 women arrived by mule cart at a New Orleans wharf who had leprosy. They put them in pest houses, or la terre lepro, leper's land. That's what they called them. These were leper homes. And then, so this was beginning to become a problem in Cosmo, New Orleans at the time. The Daily Picayune published an article. This was alerted the public to at least 25 known lepers just loose on the streets in New Orleans. And these pitiful conditions, known as these pest houses on Hagan Avenue. And so by 1883, Louisiana passed the Act 85. This was a legislature that appointed Hagan Avenue, the pest house, which was previously a smallpox hospital, as the site of containment for those diagnosed with leprosy in New Orleans. This, as you can imagine, caused public outcry. And everybody was just like, we in New Orleans was, not in my backyard. Right, NIMBYism for sure. So they like clean up the pest houses and the streets. This also corresponds with Storyville, and you
throw
can
back to our original episode.
You can kind of go back and reference that one too, how things were in certain areas of New Orleans at that time. Anyway, so all this pressure from the reporters at the time. This caused them to find a new home for the lepers that were just walking the streets, make it sound like zombies, like
move them out of sight,
right,
so they're out of mind.
Right. And at this time, they didn't know anything about it. There was no treatment, so they just thought that it was highly contagious. Nobody knew what to do with them. So when the New Orleans City Council just did little to act on this, there was a dermatologist from Tulane, Dr. Isidore Dyer, and they took it upon themselves to provide suitable medical care for these people suffering from leprosy. They did attempt to find another location, so it's like not in New Orleans, but they didn't want to put it somewhere that was close enough for these doctors to like come and go, basically. So in the twilight of November 1894, 7 residents of the Hagan Avenue Pest House, they stepped off of a coal barge. And so, but on the way up the river, they went up the Mississippi River on this coal barge. They were instructed to, I guess, the boatman to let out all the rope between the boat and the barge, because they thought, that everybody was afraid of this.
Right. And, so, and just to walk it back just a bit, okay, so we touched on the quote, I'm saying this in air quotes, plague. So, and you mentioned, not a lot is known about the disease itself at this time. It was actually 1873 when, I'm not even gonna, Gerard Hansen, a Norwegian physician, first discovers the bacteria that causes this disease. That the symptoms are painful deformity, damage to nerves, which results in susceptibility to injuries. They oftentimes would amputate arms, legs, when necessary, to remove the severely damaged parts of the body. But this is why, okay, so because of the pain, the deformity that it caused and the images that conjures, people were outcast and discriminated against. And like you're saying, people don't even want to get like within arm's reach of you.
Right.
Because the lore around it too is that these, not only is there amputation, but lore is that they'll just, the parts of the body that are so severely damaged just fall off. So you think, oh God, I'm gonna, but in actuality, they don't fall off. They're reabsorbed back into the body, which is actually pretty amazing. So just wanted to say that because I didn't mention it earlier. So sorry, carry on.
Oh yeah. No, that's fine. So when they stepped off the barge, they were 60 miles up the Mississippi River to an abandoned home of a sugarcane plantation that was called Indian Camp, and this was named for General Camp, who was a veteran of the War of 1812. He first owned this land. And the centerpiece of this plantation was the main house, built in the 1850s. This is the same architect who built the historical Nottoway plantation in White Castle, Henry Howard. And the mansion on the property was called Woodlawn. So they lived in, so what they do is they send them upriver because they don't know what to do with them, don't know how to treat them. They're like, we want them not too far away so the doctors can visit. They're certainly not going to, they did have one doctor that stayed there on the property, that was the resident physician, Dr. Wales. But it's just, they just sort of like, get them out of here. Let's just find somewhere. Here's an abandoned plantation with a home. Let's put them there. So they put them there, and it was in deplorable, dilapidated conditions, in slave cabins with snakes and vermin. And they basically just left their life and their families, and they were on their own.
Dropped off and
just like
left to their own devices.
Yeah, basically like just get out of New Orleans. So nurses didn't want to work with them because people were scared. They scared they were going to get this disease that they didn't know anything about, and they certainly didn't want to have a disfiguring disease. The nurses didn't want to work there, but they requested the help from the Daughters of Charity. These were nuns that were already in New Orleans. And the sisters, they agreed to come down. And it wasn't, they weren't scared. They just went. And even one of the newspapers, the bishop, said that they were just doing their job because everybody else was like, oh, they're so brave going down there.
It was heroic.
Right. But they just did it. Like, they're just like, this is what somebody needs to take care of them, and we're going to do this. So leprosy was starting to become a problem in other states as well, and people just started bringing their patients from these other states to this home because they had found out that Louisiana has put them somewhere, so we don't want them here, so we're gonna bring them there.
Let's take them to their place,
right? Which is, I know we have the benefit of hindsight.
It's a dumping ground,
right? But that's exactly what it was. Then there was a increasing public outcry for the government to do something, and in 1914, a Spanish-American war veteran named John Early, he goes to Washington, D.C. for a press conference and announced to everyone, I have leprosy. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure everybody was taken aback and they were shocked. But that made it all the real. And he pushed Congress to establish a place and to set up funding for the government to actually handle this public health crisis is really what it was. So Congress in 1894, they purchased the home in Louisiana, which they were calling it a leper home. They purchased it from the state, and then the federal government, they took it over in 1921. And then all the medical staff, the doctors, the Daughters of Charity, they become federal employees at that point. And then the leper home became the Marine Hospital number 66 in Carville.
Yeah.
And this was even before it was named Carville, because it was just, like we said, it was called Indian Camp. The plantation itself was called Woodlawn. And then it just had this leper home name. But they also, in this area, it was called Island. So this area was called Island, but there were a lot of places in Louisiana called Island at the time. Avery Island, Pecan Island, Sicily Island. So the mail kept getting mixed up, and the Postal Service in Washington called the post office Carville, because the postmaster at the time, his last name was Carville, and then the town became known as Carville, and then James Carville, the political strategist, is from the Carville family, the same name. So every patient in the country diagnosed with leprosy was sent to Carville. And they left their homes, they left their families, they left everything. And some of them were even brought in by chains.
Yeah.
They were just forcing them to come to this place. New Orleans was already, and still is, very religious and very heavily Catholic. And they already had the nuns in the city. And with leprosy being a biblical disease, like you said earlier, it was very much stigmatized. So to be called a leper was a derogatory term, just negative. And with leprosy, your hands and your face, this is something you mentioned earlier, become disfigured. But this is what you use to communicate. You know, people, you speak with your mouth, and you make eye contact. You use your hands as illustrators. None of the staff at Carville ever caught leprosy. That's important to know. 95% of the population is resistant to it. You don't catch it. The stigma far exceeds the risk of the danger of ever even getting it.
Yeah.
So.
And what's so tragic about the whole thing is that at the time it was not known that most people had this natural immunity and would never even contract the disease. And if they did, it could be easily cured with antibiotics. But the real tragedy, I think, is that these are, they're referred to as patients a lot in the literature that I researched, but they're truly residents. However, they lived this life in isolation where they had no rights. They couldn't vote. They had no interaction with, they were not supposed to have interaction with the outside world. They couldn't leave. It was basically like they were imprisoned, and they lived their entire existence cut off from their family, their loved ones. And like you were saying, the conditions in the really early years were, to say that they were substandard is an overstatement. They were worse than that, deplorable. And where this facility is located, it's in this swamp, mosquito infested, place where they're subjected to, or they have a susceptibility to other diseases, that just compound this terrible existence. They even had a jail. There was a jail, and oftentimes patients were forced into changing their names to protect their families that lived on the outside, so that there wasn't this discrimination. Just wanted to mention that that's the real tragedy, I think, especially in the early years.
Yeah, so you mentioned they did have a jail and then people who lived nearby, they would threaten to shoot them if they escaped. So they were treated more like inmates or prisoners than as patients. And the early doctors and chief researchers and pharmacists were actually the nuns, the Daughters of Charity. They were the ones with the courage to care for them. They're extremely smart. But going back to bringing up doctors, and you had mentioned Gerhard Hansen. He's the one who actually coined the name Hansen's disease, because leprosy had such a negative connotation. and he identified it. It is caused by the Macrobacillus leprae, which is a rod-shaped bacteria. It was the first bacterial human disease identified. I could say.
Was it? I did not realize that. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. So, but the nuns, though, they were super compassionate, and they treated everyone with love. You know, here are these people that came to this community who were isolated and ostracized, but they had these nuns who were described to as these angels that took care of them. And there were children on the property too, because a lot of them were diagnosed with leprosy as children, and they tried to make their life as normal as possible. They would have like birthday parties and music festivals. They would teach them piano lessons. They tried to make it fun. They had Mardi Gras balls. They even had a publication called The Star.
Yeah.
So Stanley Stein, he was blind and disabled, but he was an editor, and he started The Star for $1 a year publication. He just wanted to educate the public about leprosy. He was actually responsible for reforming the practices at Carville, and this was to lessen the stigma and to retract reform, which it did. He even arranged for celebrities to come and visit Carville, and that actually was very effective and worked well. And that also played into having helped these people of this community of Carville live as much of a normal life as they possibly could. So.
Yeah, and so he wrote stories about how residents even built their so as the years progressed and more knowledge and scientific advancements in the identification, treatment, etc. around the disease, it got to a point where when people could actually leave if they wanted to, I'm jumping ahead a little, they would choose to stay, because what happened is, as a result of all of those things you were talking about, building as normal of a life as possible, people that were once sick, afraid, isolated, and lonely forged family and friendships and community despite being treated like lepers. Some of them even built houses, and Stein would write about them gardening and making and selling crafts and at these festivals, and they would even received donated costumes from Mardi Gras crews from New Orleans and Baton Rouge, and they would have their own floats modified to fit down the small streets of Carville. So that is really, I guess, the beauty in the tragedy.
Yeah, make the best of what's around. So you had mentioned that they've given up all rights, and they basically lived like inmates and prisoners, even in spite of all this. And there was a time when they couldn't vote. The men couldn't even visit the ladies in their rooms.
Right.
We're talking about adults here, and they didn't have a phone. All the mail was sterilized. They put it in basically this autoclave. They burned it essentially. So they were treated as though at that time like they committed a crime, but there wasn't any crime that they committed. They just contracted this. Their
crime was
disease.
Being sick.
Right. They didn't want the couples to marry, although they did, because if they did have kids, they couldn't stay there. They would send them to St. Elizabeth's orphanage.
Okay, I'm glad that you brought that up, because when I was reading through this, what I saw just said they were not allowed to have children, and if it did happen, that the children were taken away. But I never could find to where. Yeah. Okay, so what does that mean? What happened? So is that an orphanage that cared for children of lepers only?
Oh, that I don't know. That's St. Elizabeth.
Because you're introducing this communicable disease. It didn't really make sense to me why you would take them away.
Right. Well, they just didn't want anybody to get it, contract it. And they thought, oh, well, the last thing we want to do is propagate this disease throughout society. Sense. But, conditions did get better as we'll go through. There was a family, at least, probably more than one, but one that I did see that they had 2 kids. They had a son and a daughter, and they were adopted out to or fostered out to a local family who already had like 7 kids themselves. And so they would bring the kids to the property, and it was sad because they would come up to the fence. Oh. But this family took just everything they could do was to let these kids know these are your parents, because it was the mom and dad that lived there. And so, yeah, because they met there and then had kids there. But
oh, my heart.
Yeah, but it turned out good. They were able to have a normal life because there was a hole in the fence. And so it was actually an area, there was a chain link fence, and it kind of went down over a culvert, but it just didn't, it's the way the ground kind of opened up for it. And there was a director there that knew about the hole in the fence. And that was sometimes when they escaped, they would go to this jail. Like we talked about, they would send them to jail. But at this point, the director actually enlarged the hole. He kind of looked the other way because he let them come and go. These are adults, They would, so they said they would escape through the hole and they would go to LSU football games.
What?
That was the highlight of their day. Someone would walk a mile to the local Red Rooster and have some drinks. They would fish on the lake. There was a lake there. Yeah. So, but then eventually they were able to get a pass, but they weren't allowed to use public transportation. They had to fumigate their clothes. And I thought this was pretty interesting. When they did go to another state to travel, they had to actually get permission from each state that they had to travel through.
Well, that sounds like you're on probation or parole.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And they were, at least early on, treated like institutional patients. They were experimented on.
Yep.
There was a hot box treatment. This was described as like an iron lung, but the thought behind this was that the bacterium multiplies in the cooler parts of your body. So there was some science behind it, I guess. They described it as the fever machine. They would get in naked and just like their whole body would be heated up.
I hope they didn't do that in the heat of summer.
They probably did. They probably did it all the time. But at this point, they were like, you got to try. Let's throw everything at it, Let's just try to do this. So there was a major hornbuckle, and he was fine, but his wife contracted leprosy. So she was sent to Carville. Ugh. And they told her when she arrived, they're like, you'll never see your husband again. And she said she just laughed because they're like, they don't know my husband. He moved there.
Oh, wow.
He left his life and he moved there and lived with her. Never contracted leprosy, FYI. So, there were medical advancements to stop leprosy because that's where, the attention was and the focus. Dr. Fagé in the 1940s, he was the medical officer in charge. They were using bromine to treat tuberculosis, which is a very similar bacillus. This was used in rat leprosy, very similar to human leprosy, not the same, but very similar. They used this intravenously on a group of patients. It actually reversed the effects. The deformities that they had in their face. It was amazing. Like, this was called the miracle at Carville.
Is that the what'd you call it? It's
bromine.
Is that the sulfon whatever?
They use that too.
Okay.
And then before that, I didn't mention, I guess we could, they used the carmugula oil.
Oh.
And that was injected, and it was also, I think, orally, but it was very painful and not very effective. But it was interesting because they were just so desperate to try anything that they would do this. But these shots, they would take them every day.
Ooh. And
they were extremely discomforting and just very painful. But then they started testing them every month, and they started testing negative. And then once a patient tested negative for 12 months, they could leave.
Yeah.
They could absolutely leave. And then it was so...
They just had to take their documentation with them, didn't they, that they were cleared for 12 months?
I didn't see that, but that would make sense. But they were told that if they ever wanted to come back later on in life, that they absolutely could, and then some left, but then some stayed.
I mean, that says something that, there was a level of comfort.
Right. And familiarity. So some of them actually felt that the government owed it to them to take care of them too. So that was the other thing.
Well,
it's like you took us away from our life, and or they were left there, but either way, they were like,
I can kind of see that.
Yeah,
point.
for sure. There are people from all over all the states, all other countries brought their patients to live and be treated at Carville. It was a very diverse community from every walk of life. It was like a mini UN. And so they had their own power plant, their own carpentry shop, bakery, water treatment plant, mason, dairy, paint shop, accredited schools, the best teachers. They had more in their community than they had in the surrounding communities. But that's probably because no one wanted to come into their community.
Right.
So they had to be a self-sustaining community. And they were. And even in the 50s, it looked like a planned community, very progressive. It was an integrated community in the segregated South.
And it was actually not at all what people thought it was.
Absolutely. They were making strides faster and better than anybody on the outside.
Innovation and
for sure.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it happened in little old Carville, Louisiana. So eventually, I'll tell this first though. I thought this was cute though. There's a story about they played softball games and it was a big deal. Like they would sell peanuts and just all the concessions that you would at a regular softball game, but they only had home games because they couldn't leave. But it was a big deal. Like the nuns would be sitting in the stands and everybody would come out for it. Yeah. So
America's pastime.
So there you go. But eventually, the labs moved to Baton Rouge. They still continue to find a vaccine to this day. They need to find a resistant host, something resistant in other animals. In armadillos, they are a natural host for the disease. And Louisiana probably has hundreds of thousands of armadillos, and then probably hundreds, right, of these actually harbor the disease. And they don't know how they transmit it to man. They believe that they do, but they just don't know how.
Oh, because I read that man transmitted it to armadillo.
Right. Well, it's probably a back and forth.
Okay. Pass it between species.
I mean, they've looked at insects, and it is as vectors, like what's actually going on here. How is it?
Yeah.
And it is interesting that it is and did kind of develop out of. Developed out of this community in Carville, developed out of New Orleans. It's so close to Tulane, who has an excellent program for the tropical diseases.
Like virology?
Well, that too, but they're highly specialized in, I'm not a scientist. But,
I'm not. If you're not, I'm definitely not. So
with the tropical diseases, bacterial area. So today it's treated with a cocktail of drugs, diazepam, rifampin, and clofazimine. I'm pretty sure I said those right. I'm kidding. I probably didn't. So this actually kills the leprosy bacillus, but some patients get allergic to the dead bacteria that's left in their body. So they use thalidomide.
Okay.
Which
interesting.
We remember from don't remember, but if we can research and look back in the 50s, this was thousands of massive birth defects, but they use it today in very controlled treatment, and they're very successful with it. So this is actually what kills alleviates the allergy to the dead bacteria in the body. Also interesting is that the treatment is like diabetes or diabetics. They've made breakthroughs in this through leprosy, because with Hansen's disease, they can actually save the limbs because they will treat it like leprosy. The Carville facility not only studied leprosy, but also the deformities and how to treat and rehabilitate.
Yeah.
So they've been able to save diabetics patients' legs, limbs, because
they borrowed from the research that was done in Carville.
Yeah.
You know, that's huge.
Yeah. You know what? You're welcome.
Right?
You're welcome. A nice thank you to Louisiana. That would be nice. But anyway, Carville definitely has its place in history, from experiments and education and advancements, and just not giving up. It's a special place. The nuns even said it's a holy place. Like, it's just like none other. And I'm probably going to get emotional here. But
yeah, it does make you feel, for sure.
They say that they hear singing it sounds like a choir of angels just singing when no one's around, and they liken that to, or they attribute that to the struggles that and the strides that they have made through this place. Yeah, so in 1999, the U.S. Public Health Service transferred Carville back to Louisiana. Because, you know, they had made all these advancements, and
right.
it ran its course. There is, or at least there was, still one daughter of Charity still there, and so and a handful, and I think maybe even like 2 or 3 patients still living there. I'm not sure if that is to this very date as a recording, but 500,000 patients pass through this area.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So today, the Louisiana National Guard oversees the Gillis W. Long Center and the Louisiana National Guard Corps, and they operate the Louisiana Youth Challenge Program, where they reclaim at-risk youth, which I think is absolutely
which is
wonderful.
Another just amazing effort to support and help people that are in just need of that. And then there's also the National Hansen's Disease Museum that's open to the public.
I don't know if it is during COVID, but we'll have to go check it out.
Yeah, I would like to. I think being so terrified of this place as a child, and now knowing what I know, I think it would be really incredible to go and just see it, or what's left.
Yeah, because it's right here. It is in our backyard, really.
And we're going to take Mother with us.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so
thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I'm glad we could end this one on a high note.
Absolutely. And remember to keep one eye open, because you never know what you might see. So if you're doing socials, then I'll just do
drink du jour, and then yours, and then mine. Yeah.
Woo, woo.
Why are we recording? Oh,
because it was funnier before I hit record.
And now it's going to go doo-doo.
Don't say that.
you set people up for failure.
Yeah.
You're a terrible You're a terrible teacher.
A director, come on now. You're our director. The political strategist. The political strategist.
Strategery.
Word.
Strategerists.
Yes. James Carville. Oh, didn't even mean to mess that up. So the political strategist.
I know words. I have the best words.
Shit.
Strategist.
The political strategist, James Carville, is so with the disease is
Oh my God. Corona.
oh yeah, where's the spray it down?
It's okay if she sneezes on it.
I mean, spray me.
Spray me. So when your hands and your face.
Your mouth.
I didn't even catch that.
What did you say?
It's a breaking news. You speak with your mouth.
Oh, where do I start now?
I would start with
Use your hands and your face.
this is what you use to communicate.
I think it's more you want to say face is important to express how you're feeling. You know, you know,
Right.
It's not so
Facial
much
expression.
speaking with your mouth.
That's true.
Your hands communicate.
Would you stop with all that being right shit?
Okay, you know what? I'm not even going to.
We're not going there.
You've been listening to Southern Discomfort with April and Christine. As you can tell, this is one of the most unique podcasts on the internet. So we want you to be able to reach out to us. Send emails to southerndiscomfortpodcast@gmail.com, on Facebook at Southern Discomfort Podcast, and on Instagram at Southern Discomfort PC. And for shows, visit southerndiscomfort.podbean.com. And this podcast can be found anywhere you get your podcasts. Till next time, keep one eye open because you never know what you might see. This is Southern Discomfort, signing off.